Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. Now, every day we talk about how a different industry is being transformed by technology. And today I wanted to learn more about how advanced data management is transforming new medicine development. And also the changing role of the traditional contract research organisation and how they have had to radically change with the times as newer augmented technologies continue to permeate the industry. And also discuss the increased clinical data success and how new technology means there is no longer the burden of tedious admin tasks that ended up taking up all of workers' time. And yes, although this is a tech podcast, I also want to offer a timely reminder that duty to the patient must be at the heart of everything that they do, because the industry's duty is to the patients foremost, and technology can help better fulfill that duty. That's what I want to talk about today, and after searching far and wide for someone to help me cover this, my journey led me to Richard Young from Veeva Systems. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Macclesfield in the UK, where Richard is waiting to talk about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today. And to everyone out there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Richard Young, and I am the Vice President of Strategy for Vault CDMS here at Veeva. Basically means I'm responsible for defining our strategy for clinical data management within Veeva.
And I'm looking forward to digging a little bit deeper on the technology and some of those acronyms. But before we do, I always love to take my guests back in time for a moment. So I'd love to find out more about how you got your current role. So can you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that put you on this path you're on today?
Yeah, I suppose from a personal perspective, I mean, I was born in Zambia, lived in South Devon, moved to America, moved back to America, came back. So I've been a bit nomadic in, shall I say, my lifestyle choices. And I think there's a little element of that in how I came into data management, because we'll explore data management as we go, but let's be honest, there aren't many 6-year-olds out there who have said to their mother and father, when I grow up, I want to be a data manager. I certainly wasn't one of those. I'm someone who went to university. I studied biochemistry, and I had a degree program that had a third year out in industry. And as I did the first 2 years, probably only one conclusion I've reached is I didn't want to go anywhere near a lab, taking it away from the laboratories. And yet every placement that came up on the notice board for me to apply for was lab work. And there was more lab work. And I was basically running out of options. And then this advert for something called data management at Glaxo, as it was then, came up. And I spent a couple of hours in the library trying to find out what data management was. And really, my motivation was there was no mention of a lab anywhere in that ad. And through that process, I kind of fell into data management, and I loved it. It was that combination of using my science without being a scientist, problem solving. For someone who likes chess and other games, it just kind of fitted with the way I think. And the chance to be a little bit nomadic in not only your thinking, but your behavior, as in traveling the world, solving problems, designing trials, meeting people, helping people across the globe. It just ticked the boxes for me. And that's how I came into data management. I suppose how I came to Veeva, well, I got lucky. As I went around the world, there was this kind of technology revolution in data management. And we decided to leave paper behind and move to different technological solutions. And I rode that wave and then moved from kind of the operational side into the technology side. And after probably 12, 15 years doing that, I got frustrated. And I took some time out, and Veeva came along. And Veeva were very interesting. They basically said, well, you like telling everyone what you think they should do, so why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Come and build it here. And that's how I came to Veeva.
Wow, what a great story. And one of the reasons I always ask that question, it's fascinating to find out how the universe gives us all that little nudge in the right direction. And listening to you talking about wanting to avoid the lab there, it's almost like in The Godfather, where he says, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. But you got into data management, and there's still that lab element there is still followed you around, but it all happened for a reason. As you said, that path led you to Veeva Systems. And for people that are hearing about them for the very first time, can you just tell me a little bit more about the company and the kind of problems that it solves with technology too?
Yeah, definitely. So Veeva for me is a good fit for me culturally.
Yeah.
Veeva has a number of key goals, but effectively we are building the clinical trial platform for life sciences. We're dedicated to life sciences, and we're dedicated to making clinical trials better.
Yeah.
But our purview goes beyond just the trial, because this isn't just about making a better trial. It's about delivering the results of those trials to our patients and putting the results of those positive trials in the hands of our patients. So for us, it's about preclinical into clinical, all the way through into the commercial world, and allowing organizations to distribute and ultimately provide their solutions through doctors, GPs, and health providers around the globe in a sustainable and scalable manner. And that's exciting for us because, you start a project with a new chemical entity, you watch it develop and grow a bit, you see the trials. Many of those trials will ultimately result in failure. That's the nature of the business we're in. But the ones that go through, they're the ones that are exciting, that change the world. You think about COVID and how dramatically research changed the world there and what we were doing there. But as someone who's just recovering from flu, as you might hear in my voice, the flu vaccines, and all the way through to diabetes and everything else that we work on. And that's what Veeva very much is about, is helping sponsors, partners, customers, clinicians come together to operate clinical trials better.
And on this podcast, every day, I try and explore a different area of how technology has transformed that. So to set the scene for today's conversation, how have you seen technology impact the role of data management since all those years ago when you were trying to avoid the lab and you got into data management? How have you seen technology impact that role?
That's a great question. I think data management's kind of lived on the edge of this promise. Technology is going to solve us. It's going to make everything better. And my frustrations over the last 15 years, I don't think it's delivered on that promise. And the reason I came to Veeva is, and you'll forgive me a little bit for the way I'll say this, but I think what clinical trials need is a true platform. And I look at what Apple has done for us, and let's face it, most of us have got an Apple Watch or an Apple phone, and there are other devices available, I should quickly say. But I think of the clinical trial platform as the iOS is to Apple. If you have a plug and play platform that can give you the ability to engage patients the right way, then you can revolutionize clinical data management. It used to be that we would think about a big phase 3 study that would capture maybe 1 million data points, largely on paper. And we would have troves of people processing bits of paper and doing double data entry. Now we live in a digital world, and that platform needs to deliver not 1 million data points in total, but 1 million data points per minute in some cases. You think about the volume of data that can come off your watch, your Fitbit, whatever you might be using. As a data manager, it's kind of, it's time for your head to explode. This is not one-dimensional research anymore. It's 2, 3, and 4-dimensional. The data volumes, the data types, the varieties are huge. And I think as a data manager, if your toolkit is Excel and paper, you're really in trouble. If your toolkit is a true platform, an iOS type of platform, then I think you can really start to solve problems. And remember, that's why I came into it. As a chess player or someone who wants to solve problems, that for me is the ultimate piece of it. And I think everyone who's gone into data management has that same mindset. How do I solve problems? How do I make trials better? Well, I can work harder, but please help me work smarter. And that's where I think we're really going.
And as someone that wanted to come into this industry and solve problems and work smarter, how does the use of platforms like Veeva's help improve clinical data success, would you say? Because as you said a few moments ago, the space has undergone a huge transformation over the last 2-3 years because of the pandemic. So what kind of role does this platform play in that?
I think it allows you to retest everything. I think clinical trials in one form, shape, or another are rapidly approaching 100 years old, possibly even older if you go back to the old vitamin C and scurvy experiments on it cross Atlantic boats. But the reality is they've certainly been mainstream and largely unchanged for 75 years. Mm-hmm. Well, if I gave you the opportunity to start now with a fresh piece of paper and design a clinical trial, I think many of the things we do would just disappear.
Yeah.
You would engage patients far earlier. You would think about the real world setting they're in. You wouldn't make them come to a location without good reason to see a caregiver or to give a blood sample. You let them do things locally, but you'd also give them their data back. You'd also accelerate the use of that data so that they've got learnings they can bring into their everyday life to change their diet, their habits, their exercise regime. You would also have, I think, a propensity to avoid single-use data. And by that I mean, we collect data from a patient and we use it to record a result. Well, why don't we reuse it to avoid a clinical trial in the future? Why don't we reuse that data to shape the trials of the future in a better way? And I think that's where you need a platform, because that ability to look from the very first keystroke of a program to the very last keystroke is something that we've lacked. We don't have that ability to look over everything we've done, every decision, clinical or operational or otherwise, and make sure we've done the best job we possibly could. And I think that's where a platform can really come in and help, because it gives you that natural native ability. Every time I have to plug different systems together, everything breaks. It just, and I think clinical trials probably takes that sentiment to the extreme, because we design a trial with all the right intentions and all the right expectations. But as soon as you put that chemical, that drug, that device into the hands of a human, things will happen. And when things happen, you have to be quick to react. You have to have the ability to adapt your protocol, to adapt the design and your execution model. Well, you need systems that will adapt at the same speed as you're trying to adapt. You can't put your whole trial on hold for weeks and months while you catch up with the admin of doing that. So from my perspective, you need a platform that will streamline all the things you're doing and make those stepping stones collapse into one nice, easy journey.
And just to bring to life some of what you're saying there, can you expand on how incorporating technology into data management and clinical trials together benefit patients and enable faster development of new medications and drugs? Because that's the ideal goal, isn't it? That's the destination. But can you expand on how you do that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, if you think about the couple of phases there, if you think about the trial design and execution phase first, we should also talk about the commercial one. Let's talk about the trial design and execution bit first. To make sure you're using historical data to guide you in those early decisions, you're going to create a protocol, a plan for the clinical trial you intend to execute. Well, let's make sure we're building it based on the most up-to-date and accurate information. Where are you going to find the patients? Which sites are the best sites to support your goals? Do that effectively and quickly and transition into early execution, but also have a platform that will allow you to get the study up and running quickly. That's good for patients because patients can have access to the trial quickly. It's reassuring because patients know they're entering the best trial, because while we are fortunate to work on some indications which are fairly safe and might be embarrassing or have a short-term inconvenience, we also work on a lot more research where that need for speed and the outcome desire to be accurate is much greater. We work a lot in oncology, we work a lot in rare diseases where the alternatives don't bear thinking about. So every day we can shave off those timelines and get that study up and running is a day saved for a potential patient that might gain significant benefit. The platform allows you to do that. And by connecting the world of clinical and data, you get the study started faster, which means you accumulate data, which means your clinicians can make real-time decisions based on whether or not that trial, designed the way it is, the way it's been executed, is the right trial for those patients. And we often talk about, in simple terms, we talk about, we want you to succeed quickly and we want you to fail fast. And what we mean by that is if your trial, if your investigational compound or solution is working, let's do more of that research and find a faster way to confirm that solution is right for those patients. If it's not working, let's bring that research to a close. Two things. One, you avoid exposing any other patients to a treatment that's unlikely to help them. But also then, as a sponsor company, you can reinvest the money you would have spent in an unsuccessful research program in something that might hopefully be a lot more successful. So I think that platform is allowing sponsors and their partners and the medics and GPs and health providers to make better decisions with patients about trial participation. And then once you've got a successful solution, the race is on is to commercialize it. Not just for sponsors who need to hopefully recoup some of the money they've spent to this point, but also for patients, particularly in rare disease. We don't want to wait 6 months or a year to get commercial access to a solution. We want it right away. So how do we bring all of those activities as far left in the timeline as we possibly can? Well, you don't reinvent the wheel. Pull all that clinical information over and let it kickstart your commercial planning. And again, that's what a platform does.
100% with you on that. And they also say repeatedly at the moment that the pace of technological change is just going to continue to race forward at breakneck speed. And some even say that it's never going to move this slow again. And you've just got to look at how our life has completely changed through technology in the last 3 years alone. And I'm curious, for the data manager that's listening, how should they be upskilling to adapt to the changing role of the industry due to technology? Is there any insights you can share around that?
I think it's a great question. I think the first thing is, as a data manager, I'm delighted to say there's never been a better time to be a data manager. I think in the last 10, 15 years, as an industry, we've talked about the future of data management versus CRAs, risk-based monitoring. The talk was always about the decline of data management, the computer would take over. And if you look at where we're going now, it's the exact opposite. Data managers are more in demand than ever. COVID created a huge spike, and rightly so. But coming on the back of it, we're now realizing there's an opportunity to redesign clinical trial methodology. But that takes expertise. And so we're talking a lot now about, do we separate into kind of clinical data management, the more traditional cleaning of data, an activity we'll always need, versus clinical data science? And I think there's a few different concepts in between, but as a data manager, I would say there's the traditional cleaning where there's expertise required. There's also kind of the out-of-the-box problem solving required, because historically we've never tried to put these combination of data sources together. We've not tried to link them in a way that tells a cohesive and coherent story to a caregiver and to a patient about their expectations of this trial. So you need data scientists or data managers to be part of that story. So the upskilling for me is really to think about data, to think about that scientific knowledge, but also to think about the tools you use in your everyday life. Because if we can apply those into clinical trials, we will make significant advancements. And I always tend to think about simple examples. I think about when I take my 6-year-old daughter to the McDonald's drive-through, and if you ever go through, should you go through the drive-through, I would ask you and the listeners to take a look at the digital screens, the menus. And if you do it a couple of times, like I have to, you'll notice there's a difference on whether you're in a queue or not. If you're free to drive up and there's no queue, all of the more expensive, time extensive items will go to the middle of the menu, because didn't have to queue, I might order something a bit more elaborate. If I've been in a big queue and I'm in a hurry, all the shorter time preparation, cheaper options go to the middle so that you can get processed faster. Well, simple thing, but that's options, and that's a way of controlling supply and demand in a way, but it's actually looking and reacting to customer need. Well, for customers, for me, are patients. So how do I react to their needs in real time? And I look to things like McDonald's and Burger King as real-time providers. I look at some of the big department stores in the US that every time you check an item out at a checkout, it automatically connects with the distribution warehouse and automatically starts to do two things. One, restocking. Two, change the price points. If items aren't selling, reduce the price. If they are, put the price up. You can see that live happening in front of your eyes. Why can't we see that in clinical trials? That's got to be the big thing. And so to all those budding data managers out there, I would say, come in prepared to solve problems. For the existing ones, it's the same. But use your experience and challenge everything. When people say we can't do something, treat that as unacceptable. And that's what I think you should demand of your technology companies. And that's where I think the opportunity to upskill really comes. But it's not an expensive upskilling. It's use your everyday life to drive the questions. And from the questions, you'll get the right answers.
So many great points in that. And I must admit, I feel like an NPC now for not noticing those prices at the drive-through. I'm going to see the world in a whole new light now. But when
you spend as long as I have in that queue with a 6-year-old going, "Where's my burger?" You look at these things, so trust me.
So looking towards the future, what excites you about it, and especially where advanced data management is transforming new medicine development? Because I think if any of us spend any amount of our time doom scrolling down the latest headlines or tech headlines, it's nothing but bad news. So I'd love to restore the balance a little. What excites you about the future?
I think to be a data manager is very exciting. I think there's opportunity everywhere. People are trying to reinvent clinical trials. We're looking for novel thinking. I think for patients out there, and let's be honest, one day we will all be patients. That's just the reality. As a patient or a potential patient, what excites me is the time it takes us to bring relief is reducing every day. And I said bring relief. I don't mean we'll cure every illness overnight, but we are finding advancements that will ease symptoms. In some cases, will provide cures. We're also finding better ways to quantify and understand different indications. I mean, if you think about COVID, from March 2020 to where we are today, typically it takes us 8 to 9 years to bring a new medication to market. Look what we did in 18 months to 2 years. We proved things could be done differently and successfully. Were they all perfect? Probably not. Is there a chance we missed the odd opportunity? Almost certainly, yes. But when you operate at that speed and that volume, and people had to make decisions, I think they deserve to be hugely applauded for the work that went on to get those things done. And that fuels my excitement, because one thing is for certain as we go forward, it's not just about solving the big diseases like obesity, like cancer. It's about providing the right attention to rare diseases, those diseases that only impact 100 or 200 people in this world. But if we could take some of those out and actually provide really highly obtainable solutions for those patients, that would dramatically change the world. And that fills me with excitement, because that will come through speed. If it takes us 10 years, 20 years, that doesn't help the patient who is looking at a dark future right now. If we can do things quickly and in a controlled way today, then that's good cause to be excited.
That's a perfect moment to end on. But we did start the podcast today talking about your origin story, what put you on this path. I'm now going to ask you to reflect a little as we come full circle and say none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. So I'm curious, was there a particular person that you're grateful towards who maybe helped get you where you are, saw something in you, just invested a little bit of time in you, or anyone at all? Is there anyone you'd like to thank on the podcast today?
Yes, I think actually, if you're bear with me, I think there's 5 people, and I won't thank them all in tremendous detail. I actually genuinely think part of it starts with your parents.
Yeah.
Growing up in Zambia, moving to the UK, being encouraged to travel. I think there's a sense of doing the right thing that came through that, which I think needs to be recognised and is so easy to overlook. So I will make sure I call them out first. I also think I got lucky when I worked at Glaxo and I met a gentleman called Dave O'Shaughnessy who taught me the right way to do things. He taught me the benefits of working really hard. He taught me how to party hard as well. So that's always helpful to find that balance. But then, people like Mike McKelvey at ParExcel, who pushed me to do things outside of traditional data management and think differently, I would certainly reach out to him. But probably the one I would most single out is a gentleman called Alan Matteo, who I've had the privilege of working for the last 12 or 13 years, because one, he headhunted me to join a company. So he put effort to recognize some potential. And he's coached me over the last 15 years, really in a way that I have to be eternally grateful for. He's opened my eyes to some things that I wouldn't have thought of, perhaps as a purely traditional data manager. He's also let me find my own way in things. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And if you let me just do one last,
Sure.
I started with my parents. I'm going to finish with my wife. Because my wife and I actually met at university, and we started on this journey together in the sense of both not wanting to be in the lab. I got into data management. I helped her get into data management before we were romantically linked, I should quickly add. And now today, she gives me the ability to commit what I do at work, but also she's an incredible sounding board. She helped set up the 100,000 Genome Project in the UK and other things. So to have a partner who really understands what you do, how you do, and the benefits is both grounding and incredibly supportive. So if you'll forgive my indulgence, I'll go with all 5, if that's okay.
No, not at all. I love to hear stories like that, because I think we all impact everyone around us in ways that we've got no idea sometimes. So to hear you thanking those people out loud, and they may be tuning into this podcast and listen, and you might get a tear in the eye because they're probably completely unaware of just how much you've impacted them. So thank you for sharing that. And we have covered a lot in a short amount of time today. So for anyone listening, what is the best place for listeners to find you or your team online and find out more about anything we talked about today?
Absolutely. I think there's a number of assets. From a clinical data management perspective, I'm very proud to support the Society of Clinical Data Management and the Association of Clinical Data Management. But certainly, I'm part of the board for the Society of Clinical Data Management for their annual conference. That's a huge resource that's available. I am fortunate to host a much smaller podcast than yours, where I try and interview people from data management. So I encourage people to think about that. But you know what? Ultimately, please use me as a resource. I'd love to hear from people, whether you're starting about joining or thinking about joining data management or a longer term servant of the industry. I'd love to connect. So LinkedIn is a great place to start. So please, I encourage everyone to reach out to me. I'd love to connect and continue to share ideas.
Awesome. Well, I'll add the links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. What was the name of your podcast again? I'll check that out.
It's the Future of Digital Clinical Trials.
Awesome. Okay, I'll add a link for that too. So we covered so much there, from how technology has impacted the role of traditional contract research organizations, data management, the importance of platforms like Veeva to help improve clinical data storage, and the incorporation of technology into data management and the clinical trials that benefit patients. It's all about patients at the end of the day. And that is the magic behind this for me. But more than anything, just thank you for coming on, sharing your origin story, and even those lovely thank yous at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Wow, once again, we covered so much there, didn't we? Especially how incorporating technology into data management and clinical trials benefit patients and enable faster development of new medications and drugs. But we should never lose sight of the fact that the industry's duty is to patients, and technology should be able to help us better fulfill that duty. So a big thank you to Richard for coming on here and offering that reminder, and also sharing his fantastic insights. So many big talking points to finish on, and if anybody's got anything they'd like to talk about or carry on the conversation with me, ask a question, come on the podcast, whatever it is, you know the drill by now. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. I always ask, though, don't just hit follow. Let me know where you listen to the podcast. I'd like to spend a little time getting to know each and every one of you too. But that's it for today's episode. I cordially invite you to join me in doing it all again tomorrow, but a big thank you for listening today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.